And welcome back. It's time for the first part of our interview segment on Monday's special. I want to reintroduce my guests to you. As you saw earlier, we have two sets of panels, and we want to kick it off from the leading campaign teams, Raphael Tuju, Secretary General of the Jubilee Party, and ODM insider and legislator Peter Kaluma. He being here, of course, as part of the NASA coalition, but the party that produced the presidential candidate in that arrangement. So I want to begin with both of you gentlemen. Good evening and welcome to the program. Tuju, let's start with you. It was a big day, certainly for Jubilee. Very excited to see the president, I'm sure you were, wearing his strongest suit yet as campaigner-in-chief. How does the party feel now that he has been cleared to run for a second term since 70 days to the general election?
Well, one thing is that it was a great day for us, and it's been a great few days in the sense that today was a big contrast from the situation about 5 years ago when he was candidate Uhuru then. Today was not only candidate, but he was an incumbent as well. A few days ago, he was actually addressing the world community, the world stage, representing the whole of the African continent at the G7. That was a great contrast when you compare it, for example, with the time when the shadow of ICC was looming, really big on him. And when at that time he was not yet, he was still just a candidate, the same forces which warned Kenya that choices have got consequences are now rolling out the red carpet because of the several achievements that this government can boast of. So it was a great day. We are ready to take our story to the rest of Kenya.
Why is this such a key part of the Jubilee message this time round, that see the contrast from 4 or so years ago when he was then standing before ICC? What is it that you believe telling your story by playing back the contrast will do for you in terms of delivering votes?
Well, I think we are in this lucky position that we have a scorecard that we can refer to, but even most important is that we are trying to bring this country together so that together we can transform the country for now and for the future and for future generations. This is transforming the country in areas of education, in areas of infrastructure. The day after tomorrow, a new railway line, the SGR, will be launched on 31st. This is replacing a railway line which has been there for more than 100 years. That's a big story. It has happened in the government of President Uhuru Kenyatta. You can't take away that from him. It doesn't matter how much you don't like him. That you can't take away from him.
All right. Peter, let's come to you. Yesterday was your big day when ODM and NASA flag bearer Raila Odinga got the nod to go ahead and run in this election. What is going to be your key campaign message?
Yeah, and yesterday was a day like no other. You remember up to yesterday when the NASA presidential candidate was presenting his papers, some Kenyans still had doubts about whether indeed he would be the sole candidate or there would be other, NASA Pentagon members also presenting papers. So yesterday was, of course, a huge day for us. In terms of messaging, I believe the glimpses of them, began coming yesterday. But top in the agenda are those 7, core pillars we formed NASA around. One was that we want to create this Kenyan nation which has eluded us as a people from independence. We want a Kenyan where we don't talk too much of tribe and where all Kenyans feel equally treated and not discriminated against. So unity, national cohesion and integration. The social fabric of our society is, of course, agenda item number 1. Number 2 is to deal with, the economic situation of the country. And in terms of the economic situation, you remember, Anne, you were talking about the need to fight corruption. And we have said here in times without number, if the nation would care to go back to what we've been discussing here, that we are wasting so much into corruption. And that one, of course, is, destabilizing our economy. So the fight against corruption is at top of our agenda. The idea that leaders, do business with the state, particularly, the top leaders from members of parliament going up, is something that, we are concerned about and we are going to deal with. The issue of cost of living the issue of the current debt burden and how to deal with it so that we can have a stable economy. Those are going to be fundamental to us. But as I've said, the main thing, of course, is how to fight, this animal called tribalism and create one nation called Kenya. But the third issue is, of course, how we deal with the matters of historical, injustices, so that the people of Kenya can move together in one accord. Those would be, the summation and of the pillars will be, campaigning around.
All right. And as it stands from a NASA point of view, do you believe that there is a level playing field going into this election?
I think that it is too early to make a conclusion on whether the elections will be free and fair. Ours is to go with the promise in the law that it has to be free and fair. If you look at the Constitution, you look at the Elections Act, we did replace, you remember, as a people, the commissioners at IEBC a short while back. Our belief is that they will keep to the oath of office, keep to the law, and secure this country for once free and fair elections. And I've said here before that most of our elections since the advent of multipartyism have been rigging competitions. We don't want that. We want free, fair, transparent and credible elections which can then yield peace and stability for our nations going forward.
Right.
So for now we are giving IEBC the benefit of doubt. At a personal level, not at NASA, I'm looking at how they are going to deal with this animal called voter verification and more fundamentally voter audit, the audit of the voting register. Because, many county in our country today have a population of barely 2 million, but their registered voters are over 1 million. You question in which society is this in Kenya or anywhere in the world where the children will be more than adults. The possibility therefore that we have, ghost voters, dead voters, and that you may be having, multiple voters are there. So depending on how we cleanse the register and we undertake verification, I think it will boost our confidence as we move forward.
All right, so IEBC being a key pillar for you in terms of a level playing field. Raphael, I pose the same question to you. Arguably, many see that you have the upper hand with the incumbent being your flag bearer. Do you believe that there is a level playing field, and what components would you be looking at going into this election?
Well, as my colleague here says, we give IEBC the benefit of the doubt. But we certainly are worried about IEBC in the sense that we feel that they are very easily intimidated, given the fact that the ODM went to the streets and made sure that their predecessors were bundled out. So very often we think they are scared of these people, they are scared of being bundled out, so we don't think the playing field is level. I think it is in favor of ODM, if I may say so, because they have a way of intimidating them. But if they are left to do their work, because at the moment I think you have various cases which have been put by ODM to stop them from doing their work, like the issues of tenders for ballot papers and so forth. If they are allowed to do their work, we think they can be able to pull it off.
Are you saying the security of tenure for IEBC officials and that concern could cause them to sway the election in the opposition's favor?
I think there's just too much noise around them, and sometimes when there's too much around you, it stops you from being efficient. But it's not a big deal.
All right. I'm going to come to my expert panel now, but before we speak to you, I just want to recap for you some of the numbers we've been talking about, because we want to look at the likely combinations that could deliver the win that both sides would very much be hoping for. So let's start with the Western region, and we're just going to show you those numbers again. This is 1.9 million strong, with Kakamega, Bungoma, and Busia as the most vote-rich areas. Let's move on to Nyanza. Kisumu, Kisii, and Homa Bay being some key areas each side would want to eat into 2.6 million strong. And remember, these figures that we are showing you are from the second mass voter registration exercise. The register has not been cleaned up yet. Let's move on to the Rift, 4.4 million strong, with Trans Nzoia, Nakuru, and Uasin Gishu being key areas there. Move on to Central Region, 1.7 million strong, Kiambu, Murang'a, and Nyeri being particularly vote-rich. Moving on to the Eastern Region, 2.6 million strong, Meru, Machakos, and Kitui taking the cake. To Northeastern now, where we have 456,000 registered voters, Mandera, Wajir, and Garissa being key And let's look at the coast now. Mombasa, Kilifi, Kwale, 1.7 million registered voters. To my panel, let's begin with Edward Kisiangani. Prof, what do you think of the likely combinations that Jubilee would be very interested in getting in terms of taking them over the 50+1 mark?
I think if you look at the history of this country, the voting has been quite ethnic. And although we are trying to run away from that, there are sizable number of the voters who go by that ethnic thinking. So if you look at that, Jubilee would like to bank Central Kenya for obvious reasons, because the president comes from that region. And Jubilee will also like to get the Rift Valley because the deputy president comes there, especially the Kalenjin occupied Rift Valley. And you have this was the Gishu, Baringo, Bomet, Kericho, Nandi. These are some of the areas that the deputy president is seen to control. So Rift Valley, again, they will see that combination. I think after they have finished that, they would like to go to Eastern Province. And in Eastern Province, they will be realistic that the Kitui Machakos vote is not too much assured, so they would like to get the entire Meru vote and get it, I think, to get a winning combination. Then in Nairobi, they know that there is going to be a big tussle between Jubilee and, of course, NASA. It will be very close to call, but traditionally Nairobi has always been a place of ethnic profiling. People really are educated, but they lapse into it least so much. So if you look at the way NASA has been structured around certain ethnicities that dominate Nairobi. So Nairobi is likely to have an edge. I mean, NASA is likely to have an edge, but it will be very close. So Jubilee cannot ignore Nairobi, because if it works hard, it can also get Nairobi. So that combination generally you get, and in Nyanza, to make sure there is a dent in the NASA bandwagon, I think there will be an attempt by Jubilee to get the Kisii region. And when it gets the Kisii region, it reduces the ability of NASA to get the entire Nyanza. So I think that is how Jubilee would like to run with that. That
would be the Jubilee approach to winning the election. Barack, what do you think it should be for NASA?
I think that essentially the patterns which Professor Kisiangani has described remain essentially the same patterns that we saw in 2013. So that one is talking about retaining the strongholds that you had. And therefore the question that follows is how are you going then to win? And I think that that which we call the swing vote is not going to be found in any one geographical area that is perhaps isolated, and which we would be saying that the two formations are trying to outgun one another. It's going to be more of a question of getting everybody out. If you are looking for a swing vote, go back into your stronghold and find out those people who may be undecided. And they may be undecided not in the sense that they are thinking about voting for somebody else, but undecided in the sense that they are thinking about maybe just staying at home. They are not feeling enthusiastic about coming out to vote. The concentration is, in my view, going to be more and more about fishing more and mining more and more of your strongholds.
All right, and of course we're going to get back to the two campaign strategists to talk about that. But Kamoto, do you agree? Is there an undecided vote in this election, or do you think people have pretty much made up their minds?
I think there's the undecided at two levels. One is the one of those people who are not sure whether it's worth the effort. This is one of those elections where, like I said, the enthusiasm gap is quite significant. So ensuring that you get those ones enthused to come out and vote is going to be a very critical part of how you the messaging, the promise, and that promise is a promise that is believable even in terms of the history that you can provide. But I think there's also significant questions about the future, because particularly in the what I'll call the swing areas, which do not have a direct vote in the presidency, for example, if you're talking about areas in Western Kenya, if you're talking about even the Rift Valley itself, if you're talking about Eastern Province, Machakos and Kitui, one of the questions they're going to be asking is, this election, where do we need to invest for the future? Not just about this election. Where is our future best defined? If you go to Machakos and Kitui, is our future defined within the NASA fraternity? Or is it defined probably in starting to look for spreading our interest the way Western Kenya spreads their interest? That is going to be a very important question. If you go to the Rift Valley, one of the questions that people will be asking, is our future in Jubilee, is our future in Jubilee assured? Or is it, are there rumblings there that we should be concerned about? That will define whether those people are going to come out in the numbers that you need. Yeah. And that could determine the 50% plus one.
Yeah, let me come back to my campaign teams. Raphael, starting with you, what is your get out the vote strategy? Because as we've heard from the analysts here, at the end of the day, it's going to be about getting the last man out to the polling station.
Well, I'll certainly not discuss that on national television. Those are strategic issues. But I think the one thing that we're determined to do is that we want to talk to Kenyans the truth. I'd like to congratulate my brother, Honorable Kaluma here, because for the first time today, I heard what NASA stands for. And I wish they would continue to tell Kenyans what they stand for. I was trying to listen to this yesterday during their rally, and at the end of it I saw people dancing, and then they played some football which was non-existent, and that was the end of it. Then they come up with some stories of 10 million plus, which means nothing, because if you look at the discussion of what we're discussing in terms of how the regions are likely to vote, you'll work very hard to give them even 4 million votes, forget about 10 million. So if they came out with the truth, it will help this country. But I want to assure Kenyans that we'll come out with the truth.
And so your strategy is going to be in the message, a message that is compelling enough. Yes. There are those who would argue that you're already on the losing side of that argument, to the extent that in the last election you had the compelling wave of emotion. There was the overriding ICC question, and that was the get out the last vote campaign. It was plain and simple for you. And that this time NASA may seem to have the upper hand, to the extent that they will be pandering on what is perhaps every Kenyan's concern: cost of living, corruption, and that these are the emotive issues that are likely to get out the vote in their support.
Well, I think we do have a lot to rally our support based on. I think I've heard my brother Kaluma talk about corruption here. That's a big one, and from Siaya through Kisumu to Nairobi to Mombasa, the NASA, the ODM, these are ODM governments, because we have the national government and we have the county governments. And when from Siaya through Kisumu to Nairobi to Mombasa, these are ODM governments. And the one area in which they have distinguished themselves is corruption.
All right. Let me come to you, Peter, because historically the NASA, the then CORD in the previous election areas, have not been the most enthusiastic voting bloc, to the extent that we saw quite a bit of apathy in the last election. What are you going to do this time round to make sure that every last man is out there voting?
And let me start by correcting that lie that has been told by the media and those who stole our vote, that our people never come out to vote. And I want you to look at the voter turnout in the last elections. The county which led was Homa Bay County at 94.7%, followed by Murang'a. Throughout Nyanza, if I were to focus on Nyanza, no county was below 91%. So this idea that the NASA, voter, population never comes out to vote is of course a propaganda that has been used to dissuade our people from coming out to vote. Now, voting this election...
Equally, there's been the question of the low registration in NASA strongholds. Does that change the equation this time round? Yeah,
there has been a deliberate government policy. This is the reason, and you would see the population between Kiambu, Bungoma, Kakamega are nearly the same, but Kiambu is giving you about 1.2. Bungoma and Kakamega cannot go beyond 750,000. There have been those administrative and policy implementation by successive governments. But let me say, this time around, if you look at the figures, I can say that as the NASA team, we've never faced an election more confident. One, we must remember as we analyze this issue that the figures look very good across the country. If you remember, the voter registration in Coast during last elections was affected by that thing that was called MRC and others. This time it has gone, quite high up. If you look at the voter, registration generally across the country, the numbers look good. And you need to remember that the NASA flag bearer this time has consistently, in fact from the year 2007 coming to 2013, taken 6 out of those 8 provinces we are counting there. So we need to be assured that voters are going to come out. Number 3, let us get out of the thinking that there will be voter apathy also in our areas. And people never vote, for a thing. People vote against something. And I can tell the country today that nothing has been easier going for an election campaign as an opposition. In fact, it is so sweet because everything is being looked at against Jubilee and their performance. Is
that right? All right, we're going to talk about that. I want you to hold your horses there because I don't want you to jump the gun. We're just taking a short break on Monday Special. We return with our 2 mega panels tonight. Of course, we've got the men who are sitting in campaign teams and strategizing it out for their presidential hopefuls. Raphael Tuju from Jubilee and ODM and NASA represented by Peter Kaluma. And also we have our expert panel in studio, come all the way, Ganjo, Barak Muluka, Edward Kisiangani. We're talking after the break. Stay with Monday Special.